So hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Yale College Voices. I have Mya Fisher, Dr. Mya Fisher, here with me today, and I'm really excited to chat with you. So welcome, Mya.
Thank you, Darice, for having me.
Awesome. So, Mya, I'm just going to read your bio, and then we're going to jump right in and have a conversation. So,
all right, let's do it.
Here we go. Here's Mya's impressive bio. So,
oh boy,
Mya is a trained sociologist and passionate international educator with more than 2 decades of combined expertise as a cross-cultural trainer, program development and management specialist, nonprofit leader, international education, and exchange professional, specializing in programming related to Japan and China. She also identifies as a Black woman who has greatly benefited from and been transformed by various international experiences. She leverages these experiences, skills, and knowledge together into her current leadership roles. So Mya is director of the Richard U. Light Fellowship at Yale University. The fellowship provides full funding support for intensive language study by Yale students in Japan, China, South Korea, or Taiwan. As director, she is responsible for leading the administration and management, as well as setting the strategic vision of the fellowship. She's passionate about international exchange and brings extensive experience studying and working in Japan, notably as founding administrator of the Watanabe Study Abroad Scholarship and former director of education and the Tomodachi Initiative at the U.S.-Japan Council. She has also worked for Youth for Understanding USA, Beloit College. Did I pronounce that correctly? Beloit. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
And Northwood University. In 2020, Mya launched a consulting practice, Global Equity Forward, where she advises organizations and institutions on equity and inclusion through an international cross-cultural lens. In addition, she serves as a senior advisor and board member to various nonprofit and educational entities, including iLeap and the McLean School. So Mya is an enthusiastic supporter of next-generation leadership development, encouraging young people to embrace their leadership potential, pursue interests in international opportunities, and discover their place and purpose in the world motivates and inspires her every day. Mya holds degrees from Williams College, a bachelor's in psychology and sociology, New York University, a Master of Arts in International Education, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a Master of Science and PhD in sociology. So Mya and I are also co-chairs on the DEIB committee for Yale College, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. So the first time I've met Mya was, a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, now.
While we did some work on the committee and decided to launch our survey.
Yep.
And wow. And it seems like such a long time ago, right? But it's a pleasure having you here today, and I appreciate all of the support you've given the podcast. Over the summer, we did some test runs, which was awesome, and it was great just getting to know you. So I'm wondering, we'll just start off with, I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about your journey, your extensive academic background in sociology, all the way up to your current role as director of the Richard U. Light Fellowship here at Yale.
Wow. Well, thanks again, Darice, for having me. This is, it's really a pleasure. And yes, it's been great working with you on the committee.
Likewise.
And I think, and also working with you more recently as co-chairs, it's been a very interesting adventure that I think still has ground in front of us to travel together. So,
absolutely. We're married.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Or get engaged. Right.
Yeah. And it's always weird when people read your bios back to you and you're like, it sounds like it's all was straightforward and like intentional and, that it made sense all at the time. And it so did not.
Really?
And I will say I'm still recently new to Yale, so I just finished my second year here last month. And so I'm going into my third year, and I feel like I'm still getting to know the place.
Right.
But I love my role here at Yale. I feel like this is my role as the director for the fellowship is really the culmination of a lot of different things that had to come together, had to happen in order for me to sit in this particular place. And if you had told the even college version of me that this is what I would be doing, when I started college, I wanted to be a pediatric neurosurgeon.
Wow.
And because I'd done science in high school. Yeah, very, very divergent.
Wow.
But Japan has been a part of my life since high school. I started studying Japanese at my public high school in Prince George's County, Maryland. Yay, Roosevelt Raiders. And at the time, I had a Japanese teacher who had told me about different opportunities after college, even in high school. And I sort of just kept those in the back of my mind. And she was a woman who loved to teach. She did not have to teach. She was native Japanese. And she said that she just loved sharing her culture with people.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, I'll take Japanese in high school. And apparently I had a very good ear for it and good pronunciation for a foreigner. Most Japanese people, if I talk to them on the phone or if they see me or if I've communicated with them previously and then they meet me, there's always this sort of surprise. You're not Japanese? Are you Japanese? No, I'm not. So that's always an interesting situation. But I went through college really fully exploring college. I went in wanting to do Japanese and neuroscience. I came out with degrees in psychology and sociology because I discovered along the way that there were things that I really was interested in. And I just took those classes and they sort of created a major. And after college, I spent a couple of years teaching English in Japan on the JET program, which is a Japanese government initiative that brings native English speakers into public schools in Japan. So I taught for 2 years there. And then I came back and I wanted to still stay connected to Japan, but didn't know how because at the time, anything related to Japan or East Asia was really in the policy, security, or economic realm. And none of those things were my field. So most of the job prospects were not really open to me. And so I ended up at working at the Embassy of Japan in their Congressional Affairs section. And it sounds impressive, but I think, honestly, I feel like I got the job because I grew up in and around D.C. My mother worked for Congress, so I knew how congressional offices worked. I knew how the Hill worked. But I had absolutely no interest whatsoever, but I could do the job. And it allowed me to stay connected to Japan. And during that time, I got some really good advice that said, go and volunteer and see if there are other things that you might want to do. And I ended up volunteering with the organization that sent me to Japan as a high school student. So Youth for Understanding. So I volunteered to do their orientations and go to schools and talk to students about, you should go to Japan or you should go abroad. And then discovered that could be a job or a career.
Amazing.
And that's how I sort of fell into international ed.
Wow. That's amazing. But it's so interesting when you mentioned your experience in high school, but tied into your mom having that experience in Congress, and you basically used you pulled all of your resources together and navigated that. I mean that's amazing. I'm wondering if you could tell me, since you mentioned how folks are always surprised after if they speak to you on the phone and then they meet you in person. I'm wondering about your just your personal experience as a Black woman, right? And you benefited from all of these international experiences you've had. So how did that sort of influence your career path and your passion for international education and cross-cultural training?
Yeah, it's been interesting. So for most of the things that I've done in and related to Japan, especially early in my career, I often felt like, or actually was, the only Black woman or a person of color in most of the rooms or activities that I was involved in. And so when I came back and was sort of doing the work at Youth for Understanding and helping to promote international education and international opportunities, I really felt like it was important for me to find ways to encourage people who looked like me to do these things, right? And so if there was a school or if there was a group or if, somebody came up to me and was like, I want to do this. At one point when I was in D.C., I was selected to be a Goodwill ambassador for the National Cherry Blossom Festival.
Wow.
And so that meant my job was sort of the public relations of Japan in D.C. during this 2-week-long festival of spring time in Washington. And it gave me an opportunity to go out and talk to young people in schools or community members to talk about what it meant to host somebody from a foreign country, in Japan in particular. And so I've always felt like I wanted to see more people like me do these things. And also because I felt like my pathway was not really traditional. I came to most of this work from an educational field versus, as I said before, the political, economic, or security fields.
Right.
And I was just, that sort of was my guiding principle was sort of, encouraging and helping people to see themselves in these places and spaces, and also to think about, okay, I've had a wonderful time in Japan. Not saying it wasn't challenging, not saying I didn't have some bananas conversations with Japanese people, but I always have felt embraced. And I used to say that I had always, befriended or met like your atypical Japanese people because people had been so welcoming and inviting. And I have now learned that that is probably not what happened, but it helped me to realize that I had a presumption about who Japanese people were, what they were like. And the Japanese people that I met are typical Japanese people, very open, welcoming, not without their own, challenges, opinions that we, may have had to have some very highly debated conversations with. But, I came from a place of most Japanese that I met who'd never met an American or never met a Black person before. I always approached with, okay, if I'm the first, then I understand there are going to be questions, there are going to be assumptions, there are going to be things that they don't know or understand, and I'm open to those questions. And I attribute that to my grandmother, who was, on my dad's side, Mya Fisher, who was one of those people that she could be standing on the street outside of a concert and just start talking to people. And, and she's just one of those people that, even if she initiates a conversation, somehow she still pulls people in to a conversation or wanting to have a conversation with her. And so I think that I have inherited a little bit of that from her, where
awesome
I'm willing
quality.
to have conversations with people. I don't mind. Ask me the questions. When I teach sociology, it's the same way. Ask me the questions that you've always wanted to ask, that you've been afraid of, that you thought somebody would be offended by. Nothing can offend me. I've heard it all pretty much. And I'm willing to answer those questions because those are the questions that people walk around the world with that impact their worldview and their behavior. And if I can help people with an additional viewpoint, perspective, or information that maybe can influence their actions for better, then I'm okay with that.
That's awesome. I love that. And that was probably the first thing that struck me about you when we did our work on the committee. But yeah, I noticed right away that you had no problem facing questions head on, but also, questions that some folks may feel uncomfortable even approaching the subject or, having a conversation. And that was one of the first things that stood out to me about you that I, to be honest, I loved it because, in order for this committee to sort of move forward, there has to be, you can't have fear of having a conversation, even if it's uncomfortable or, maybe helping people debunk myths. Like you said, you had an impression about Japanese people prior to some of your travel, and then you realize, oh, this is actually my experience was the everyday experience. That wasn't like unusual, and that's great. That's one of I have to say that's probably one of the first things I noticed about you, and it's an awesome quality because I think the more that you exhibit that quality, like you said, it pulls people in, and I think that's amazing because it. Not everyone has that ability to stop and have a conversation with someone, like you said, at a concert, and suddenly you're like, we have to go inside, We're here for a concert, but that's great, right?
Yeah.
Just to be able to have a conversation and pull people in and for it to be pleasant, to be a pleasant exchange. And then, one of the things I learned about just talking to everyone during the podcast was just that few minutes that you interact with someone can make an impression much, much later or even ongoing. It's not just in that moment, but they could think about you,
years
for
later.
years to come, right?
Yeah.
Like it kind of a funny example that came to mind for me. This happened maybe a couple years ago. I was at a gas station and I'm techie. So I'm trying to use my phone to pay for the gas. And for some reason, my bank kept declining it, thinking it was a fraudulent purchase. So every time I tried to hold my phone up, it kept declining. And then eventually it locked the
account. Yep.
It locked the account. And the screen said, "Oh, see a gas attendant." And I was just like, really? So I'm going inside and I went inside to say, I grabbed my wallet and I'm like, $20 or whatever on the gas pump. And the attendant was like, "Oh no, the lady just now paid on that pump." And at first I thought,
was it a mistake?
Yeah, was it a mistake? Did she pay on the wrong pump? And I'm like, oh, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, geez, now she paid on the wrong pump, and now I have to figure
track
this
her
out.
down.
Yeah. And so he pointed her out, like he said, "Oh yeah, she went outside." And so I saw her, so I'm like running up to her, like, "Hey, I think you paid on the wrong pump." And she says, "No, I thought you were in trouble, and I just wanted to help, and so I paid for your gas." And I tried to pay her back, and she's no. Yeah. And I thought that was such a nice thing to do, and the fact that she did it and took off.
Right. She's not looking for recognition.
Not looking for recognition.
It's basically like, you see somebody as a human being.
Right.
Right. You see somebody in distress. You
Exactly.
see somebody, where their humanity is on full display. And your thinking is, okay, if there's something that I can do,
right.
I will try to help.
I will try to help.
Okay, she looks like she's in distress. You
right.
ask the gas attendant, okay, is there a problem?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, it's $23 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, I can cover that.
Right,
you know, and it's like, just helping. And
mm-hmm.
I honestly think that that's the orientation that I understand we take as educators, right? Like
mm-hmm.
we are in classrooms. We are hoping that whatever we are sharing or, pouring out into our students and they're
mm-hmm.
pouring into us
mm-hmm.
is going to impact them and the world in some future way, right?
Mm-hmm.
We may not live to see it. We may
mm-hmm.
not ever see them again after this, but we trust and have faith that that's going to benefit
mm-hmm.
them
mm-hmm.
or the world in some way, shape, or form. And I think both my parents are trained educators.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's also the mindset that I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And so but I don't limit it to a classroom, right? You limit it to your experience as a human being in the world. And I feel like that is between my grandmother's perspective of being able to, just have conversations with people about things that they're not used to talking about, and sort of this trust and faith of, trying to, share things with people that will help to make the world better.
Right.
Like between those two things, I think are what really came together during the pandemic for me when I formed my company before I got my job at Yale. But because a friend reminded me, she's like, you teach on these things. Because, there was the protests and sort of, the racial reckoning and all these other things. And as a sociologist at Wisconsin, when I was in grad school, I taught 2 classes. One, I was a TA for human sexuality, and then I was a instructor for a course on race and ethnicity in American life. And so they were considered sort of controversial courses. And so, but I really enjoyed them. And at that time, in that summer of 2020, when everything was erupting, something happened in Japan where the Japanese broadcasting service aired a video, and it was an animated video to the Japanese public where they were trying to explain what the protests were and also the looting, but they conflated them as a sort of singular event. And the caricatures of the people who were doing it were people of darker complexions in sort of stereotypical outfits, sort of like wife beaters and things like that. And I remember I was like, come on, Japan, we have to do better.
Right.
And at the time also, there were a lot of Japanese friends who were trying to understand what was happening in the U.S. And I was like, there has to be something to be done. And I decided to teach a course, an abbreviated version of a course that I taught at Wisconsin, and adapted it for the pandemic. I adapted it for the current climate.
Wow.
And then I invited people in Japan who wanted to sort of better understand these things, and anybody in the U.S. And then I taught it 6 weeks virtually for free. And it was one of those things where it helped me to realize people have a lot of anxiety. They have a lot of thoughts, and people feel very strongly about a lot of these things, but they have no place or space to explore that, to talk about it. Everybody's afraid of saying the wrong thing.
Right.
And so how can I help people sort of develop their own voices around these topics so that they can have engaged conversations with people in their lives about these things? And so that was the origin of my company. And I was like, okay, this apparently is a thing that I can do, and here's my contribution. So
that's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what it brings to mind is, so as you know, Daisy Abreu was my first guest on the podcast, and Daisy, who's part of the arts, Yale College Arts. She mentioned on the podcast that her department, they hold sort of it's not a staff meeting, it's a separate meeting to allow that sort of platform for folks to have a discussion and talk about issues that they're facing and all sorts of things. And, when she first mentioned that to me, I was like, that's amazing that that a department is coming together to do that. And I wish it could happen more often. But just to have that, like you said, it's like a safe environment where it's not, you don't feel like it's a stupid comment or a stupid question, but it's an exchange and a place to do it where, at least you feel like you're learning or, learning about other folks and their perspectives and things like that. You're not
judged for being where you are in your journey.
Right, exactly.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I actually just mentioned that on Monday.
Did you?
To somebody on my team about doing that in our team meetings.
That's awesome.
And having a place for that. And I was like, I have a friend who suggested this because this is what happened in her department.
Yeah.
And so, because I also felt like, it's a really... it's a simple opportunity to do that it can start small. It could just be an open portion of the meeting, but the fact that it stands as a sort of carved out time that if somebody has something that's come up that week, they can just say that, or share it, or ask for advice, or
share resources.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome, and hopefully they're receptive to it. And like you said, you start small.
Yep.
And what'll be really interesting is to hear where things go like a year from now. To find out, like, how do people feel? Like, how did it make you feel? Did it change your perspective? Like, from some of the comments we saw on the survey. How did it change? Did it make some sort of positive change? And I hope so. I think I'm just in hearing about it, I think makes a difference that people are finally having conversations and feeling safe to do so. Because I'd probably say, I've been at Yale for 16 years and I've never been in an environment where it felt okay to do that.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of it is, again, people, there's a certain level of anxiety, discomfort, whether we can do it, whether we can say it. But I think the goal, right, is to change the environment within which people are sitting, within which we are working, right? And so if the environment feels more welcoming, if the environment, just sort of the breathing space that we are in, that we all share, if that is freer, less confining, less oppressive, then people can, again, more fully as their whole selves, their full humanity can be present. And that's really what you want. Because, you want a full employee.
Right, exactly.
Because a full employee is the most productive version of ourselves,
it
right?
Is,
and so,
I see you more than I see my own family. You know what I mean? And, honestly, and it's you want people to feel like it's a positive environment to come to every day.
Yes.
And because, like you said, it does affect our productivity. It affects our mental health. So many different things that contribute to being a good, productive employee.
Yeah.
So,
and it helps with keeping good, talented people here.
Retention.
Right?
Yes.
So I've spent most of my life outside of higher ed. I've worked with institutions, but I've worked with nonprofits. And so, it was a very interesting shift coming to Yale and coming to my particular role with the fellowship, being able to we have the resources to be able to do the programming, the outreach, the advising of students, sort of all the things that outside of these hallowed halls you had to fight for, right? Tooth and nail for resources to be able to do. And to be here and to have the opportunity to really think about and put the pieces together in a way that you feel like is something that is part of a student's educational journey, right? Not just in the classroom, but a fellowship is something that's external to their classes, but is still part of their broader educational journey and their developmental journey as productive, contributing members of society and humanity just broadly, which I know is sort of, one of the things that Yale as an institution wants to produce and, that is an output. So, I feel like, having the opportunity to do that and be a part of that and to contribute to, helping students to be more conscientious, to develop empathy, particularly after the pandemic.
Yes.
In times when they didn't necessarily have the things that we assume that they're coming to college with. Right. And being able to be nimble enough also in our roles and in our departments to be able to say, our systems assume that they have this. we are seeing that they don't have this. So what can we do to adapt to the students that we do have?
Right.
So that we can continue to produce,
and prepare them
for what is going to come after.
That's awesome. So great segue, because I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate on your work with the fellowship. And also just, and you just mentioned, promoting cross-cultural understanding. What are there certain experiences that kind of stand out in your mind in terms of the work that you do with the fellowship?
Experiences for me or experiences for students?
Why don't we start off with for you, and then you could tell me maybe a student has shared a positive experience with you as well.
Oh boy, I did not prep an answer for this.
It's okay.
So I think one of the things that I am always just floored by with this fellowship opportunity is a lot of my experiences with Japan or China or things that I've done in international ed didn't come with funding. And so I either had to seek out funding or, take out student loans or whatever to cover it. And so the fact that students at Yale have this competitive opportunity for funding, and it's full funding, to go and spend a period of time of their choice, right? They could do it in the summer. They could do it during term time. They could do it in some combination of all of those things. Or they could do it more than once. You have to apply and be awarded, but it's an opportunity that I think myself and all members of my team who've also had to seek other opportunities for funding to do the things that we've done are always just like, wow, we're so lucky. Like, or we wish we had this when we were students.
Yes. That's been a common topic. Yes.
And to be able to see students, the thing that I always get excited about is giving the opportunity or awarding students who, as a non-traditional student or student who didn't go about things sort of the normative way, I have a soft spot for people who, who exhibit leadership, potential in different ways than maybe be traditionally measured.
Right.
And so what I appreciate about this fellowship is that it really does look at your potential. It looks at your motivation. It looks at sort of these things that aren't exclusively grades, but, are you going to fully embrace this experience? Is this just something that's going to be on your resume versus something that that is going to sort of fully inhabit you,
right,
and stay with you? Because ultimately what they want is that you come back and share what you've learned with other people and get them excited to go.
Wow.
I had the opportunity to talk to meet with and spend some time with Dr. Timothy Light, who's the son of Richard U. Light, who gave the money to Yale. And, in the conversations and hearing and talking about the fellowship and sort of learning about the history of the fellowship, one of the things that I always talk to students about, but now more explicitly than I did before, is this idea that, we know that Yale graduates are going to go out and be leaders in the world. We know that they're going to go out and impact the world and the lives of people,
right,
large numbers of people across the globe, right? And so what we, for the fellowship, want to make sure of is that if you're going to go into these fields or this region, we want you to be able to understand the people, the culture, the nuance of language, and have that inform how you choose to be and act in those places and spaces.
Right.
And so that's a responsibility that I take seriously and also a mission that I can get behind.
Yes.
Right. And
yes.
so for me, that's the great opportunity of this, is that you can help students develop that sense of responsibility, develop that sense of recognition of, oh my gosh, my work, my thinking, my presence is going to matter.
Yes.
And what comes with that. And, you know, so when the things that are rewarding is when we actually have a chance to go and visit our students in the middle of these programs. And talk to them and see and hear, you know, what they have done with that experience, what they have done with their time, if they're only in country for the summer. I'm only here for 8 weeks. You know, I'm not spending any time in my apartment. I'm going and doing these things. I am meeting local students. I am, you know, exploring museums. I am, you know, trying different foods. I'm learning about, you know, history or pottery or painting. You know, the ways in which that they are fully embracing the time there helps me to know that the work that we're doing and the way that we're doing it is in line with the mission. So I feel like, okay, if I can continue to have that sort of check-in, then I know that we're on the right track.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, honestly, it almost gives me goosebumps to imagine effect, you know, having an effect on a student who literally, you know, they're gaining all of these experiences and knowledge that potentially can be world changing.
Yeah,
I mean that's amazing. And that's an awesome feeling to truly feel like you're contributing to, you know, not just someone's, you know, not just their own personal world or their own circle, but, you know, the world, you know, the globally. I mean, that's an awesome way to think about, you know, coming to work every day and to think, you know, that's the purpose of this podcast, right? We all have parts in contributing to Yale College student experience and hopefully a positive impact in terms of how they, you know, we give them all the tools and resources and opportunities and things like that. And then they go off into the world and change the world really. And I mean, literally that does give me goosebumps because it's like, wow. I mean, to imagine you may have some part in do it. You know what I mean?
That makes me nervous. So I don't think about that part.
You don't think about
No, I mean, what I do think about is, you know, so actually this is a great story. So last week, a package came to our office and my colleague picked it up out of the mailroom and she opened it and she's like, this is a student who just came back from time away or from she was one of our fellows. And she had sent us just a simple like coaster. She sent all three of us, so all three members of the Light Fellowship team. And she just sent a coaster with a note of thanks and said, I had the most wonderful experience. I couldn't have imagined, you know, any other opportunity being for me what this was. And I just thank you for your support, your help. And, you know, that's the kind of stuff that, again, just helps us, one, you know, not just the students to have a great time, right, but that they have reflected on what they have gotten out of this and how it has made them better humans, not like better students, because yes, language acquisition and development is part of the fellowship. I know. Yes. But, you know, again, we want them to be better humans. And one of the things that we do in our pre-departures orientations is we tell the students, look, there are 100 other people behind the scenes of these programs who are supporting you, who are making the things that you are doing possible. You may not see them, but if you do, please just say thank you. Like just acknowledge their work on your behalf to make what you are doing there possible. And I think, you know, gratitude, empathy, thanking, like just acknowledge and seeing people again for their humanity and for the work that they are doing for you is like that's something that I want to put out into the world. So that's something that I want. That's my personal thing that I want our fellows to be able to exhibit. Right. So that's part of sort of what the types of people that we want to send out, representing Yale, representing the fellowship, are people who are gracious.
Yes.
And gratitude goes a long way. And, you know, it's really about acknowledging people's central humanity. We may be different in a lot of different other ways, but one of the things that I talk about with my work is, you know, you connect with people as human beings first, like at heart, like, you know, you are a human, I am a human. Then what we do is we build the relationship, we build the layers upon that. We understand each other's complexities and we expand beyond that central thing. But the first thing that you do is you acknowledge and recognize somebody as a human being first. And then you can ask what they do, or, you know, what makes you happy, or what are you passionate about? You build the complexity of understanding and the relationship on that. Like, but you have to start there. Where most people are like, you go from the outside in. And I'm like, actually, no, you start from the inside, the core of their heart, humanity, and then work your way out.
That's awesome. I love that. And yeah, absolutely. And it kind of brings me back. And I know that you say you don't think about it, but I think I do. I think about it almost like I treat raising my kids. It's like, I want you to be a good person. You know, that's my big thing with my kids. It's like, no matter what you do, whether you get straight A's or not, you know, or not, you know, I want to raise my kids to be good people, you know, and just good, decent human beings. And that's probably my ultimate goal. And
I don't have kids, so this is my version. Of
but these are your kids. You know, you do, right? And you mentioned, I know you have guinea pigs.
I do. So I have guinea pigs, yes.
I'm sure you raised them to be good guinea pigs too. But
they're
no,
spoiled.
They're spoiled, right? but honestly, it's like, whether they're, you know, your kids or the students that you work with, but they are your kids, right? That because you're influencing them to be good human beings and to, you know, be gracious and show gratitude and that I think that's amazing, because I honestly feel that when you, like I said earlier, you have an experience with someone, whether it's 5 minutes or, you know, you spend time with them for several weeks or months or whatever, it impacts how you go out into the world and your daily interactions. I honestly feel, like I said, the woman at the gas station, that kind of changed, you know, it changed me a little bit, because I don't know, I was just really surprised that someone would do that. Especially in that moment. And I was in a frustrated rushed moment. And the fact that someone just thought to be kind and to want to help someone they didn't even know. And then they didn't even want to take credit for it. If it, you know, and I probably sound like, oh, it sounds so lofty, but imagine if you did one, you know, everyone did that at least one time a day. What a wonderful world it would be, right? But honestly.
Well, you know, it's funny because I've done things like that before, like, you know, people in the grocery line, if they are frustrated or payment doesn't go through. When I do a lot of driving on the road and road trips. And so what I will do sometimes is I will sometimes I'm like, maybe it's to help my travel karma, but sometimes it might be to, like, you know, pay for the car behind you on the toll road, or this radio station that's down in the DC metro area, you know, has this thing where, you know, like once a week or like once every so often they'd be like, okay, well, today is the driveway or the drive-through day where you would pay for somebody in the drive-through behind you or something like that. And so, you know, sometimes it's just fun. Sometimes it's freaky because people then try to track you down and then you don't know, and then it's a little weird. You know, it's just one of those like it's like a simple pleasure, right? It's just like what you can do for a kindness. And for me, because I live alone, I don't have, like, my family doesn't live here. I don't have kids. Like, yes, my guinea pigs are the source of my joy, but
Yes.
sometimes you just want some human connection too.
Yes,
So
connection.
you want to feel like you are a useful human to
Right.
other humans
Right.
outside of your job, right?
Yes,
And so
yes.
sometimes it's just, and sometimes
Small
it is
little-
sometimes it does make you feel better,
Right.
But then sometimes you are helping out
Yeah,
others.
absolutely. And I truly believe in that because it does matter. Acts of kindness. And even if you do bring it back into work, how we interact with each other when, if you need something from me and whatever the task may involve, I appreciate a little gratitude, and vice versa, right? I think that people forget. Yeah, and that could be a whole other conversation, but just in terms of how we treat each other as we're trying to get work done. Right?
Yeah, and part of my role is outreach, right? But even though I consider myself an introvert, a lot of people argue with me that I'm not, but I get my energy mostly from being by myself.
Interesting.
But I do enjoy meeting other people. But it has to be sort of like measured and, over time. But
Right.
Because I also invest a lot in relationships when I meet people. So I do often, and I think I may have said this to you, I was like, part of my job is outreach. I have a budget for outreach. And so I say, hey, let's have lunch. Let's have coffee.
Right.
I've done some different things around campus where I've said, hey, let's meet up and continue this conversation. And as a result, I've had a chance to meet people across the university, not just in Yale College, and which has been also cool to better understand this place as a
right?
whole.
It's very intricate.
And also to understand that different units, operate differently. They have sort of different goals and agendas and things, but somehow we're all under the Yale, university umbrella. But it also gives me an additional perspective of, recognizing all of the competing interests that so many people are trying to manage.
Right.
But, it's like, okay, but if somebody's having a hard day, let's go for ice cream. I always like to, combine these opportunities with food. And it doesn't even have to be like dinner. It can be like a simple
Something
ice
simple.
cream. We've gone for ice cream and sat outside, gone for walks with coffee.
Yep.
And so I think that's also something that I enjoy about my work. And I'm actually in the process right now of sending out an email to people that I've met across the university that, hey, I know that there are experts in, who have experience or have studied East Asian languages that aren't faculty, that may not be in Yale College. But I know y'all are out there and I would love to meet you and learn about you. And it's similar to what you're doing with the podcast. Is like there are people that have expertise that have possibly nothing to do with their jobs, but they're passionate about these things.
Exactly.
And so, and those are the people who I want, our students to see. These experiences can take you in directions that are, yes, the well-worn path, but they can also influence, impact, and be useful in so many other fields and disciplines and areas. And so, that is something also that I think is unique that I bring to the role and to the space, is saying, hey, yes, you can all be State Department, people if you want to be, but you could also be like an art restorer. You could also be, work in security. Like you can do a whole variety of things with this expertise and knowledge that you can also leverage in different ways. So that's the thing that actually makes me excited to come to work every day, like that possibility.
That's great. That's great. So, excuse me. Yes, we know that you're deeply involved, right, in international education and exchange. So what are some of the big challenges that you see while you're promoting diversity and inclusion in these spaces, and how, have you thought about how to address them, or what are you actively addressing or or maybe something that you foresee?
So what I've continued to be to realize is that the Light Fellowship is not just a unique thing for Yale students, but it's unique in the field of funding related to study abroad or international opportunities. And so thinking about, okay, not every institution, not every organization can have a mega donor that gives money to be able to do this, right? So, how can we bring the knowledge of this opportunity or others like it to students who may not normally have access to it or information about it? That's been one of the things that I feel like has been sort of important to me. And in my previous role before I came to Yale, as you mentioned, I had the opportunity to create a scholarship, the Watanabe Study Abroad Scholarship at the U.S.-Japan Council. There was a donor, and he did give money. And I got to build that program from the ground up. He told me what he wanted, and then I got to build the criteria, the application. I got to promote it at schools across the U.S., across Japan. And it really, again, as somebody who was a student who did not exhibit their potential in a traditional way, made me really think about, okay, how can we assess somebody's potential without transcripts? So that scholarship, which very much it was for Japanese to come to study in the U.S. and for Americans to study in Japan. It had to be credit-bearing, which was different from the Light Fellowship. But one of the things that the application did not require was transcripts. The Japanese applicants were very flustered by this because a lot of things when you talk about merits are all about your achievements in school, right? And so, but I designed an application that explicitly, you could submit it, but it didn't factor into the decision at all. And so thinking about how we can assess somebody's potential, yes, it takes a little bit more time. It takes a little bit more effort. But we've learned that everybody comes to these places and opportunities in different ways, right? It doesn't mean that your journey is any, more qualitatively better or worse than mine. They're different. So how do we account for those differences, but be able to see somebody's potential for this opportunity being successful? So so thinking about how we our application process is one of the things that I really spend a lot of time thinking about. We actually just revamped our one for the fellowship.
Oh, really?
To think about, to get students to really reflect on why they're doing this. A lot of people tell them, this is what you should be doing, right? But okay, is this the right time for me? Is this the right opportunity for me? Is this a good fit for me? Asking yourselves those questions. And then because of the pandemic, travel has changed. The context and situations and the on the ground have changed in different places, particularly in East Asia. And so we also want students to be, aware of and prepared and do some of their, before they go work, like their homework, to go and make sure that they understand what they're getting themselves into. And so thinking about application processes, and as I said earlier, our processes were assuming that their students were coming with certain things, right? And so now we have to rethink that. So thinking about application processes, selections, I do some external trainings about how people can sort of be mindful in selection, so that they can account for potential in different ways. Those are the two things. Money has always been one. I wrote my dissertation on study abroad decision making. So because everybody had said, lack of money is why students of color don't study abroad. And I was like, as a person of color being told about me and my group of people, I was like, I felt like that was an incomplete statement. And so I I wanted to explore that more. And one of the things that I found out is money is an issue for everybody, but how money matters is different for different people, right? And so some people are very comfortable taking out loans for these opportunities. Some people are like, I'm going to get through college without having any debt. That shapes the decisions that you make for college. I went to college not really planning to study abroad. I had plans to do other things because I knew I was planning to go abroad after college to teach in Japan. So, you know, we don't always understand people's motivations for doing things. And so trying to understand how money matters and what we can do to mitigate the things that matter related to money for students with respect to international opportunities is also sort of the second place where I feel like there's work to be done.
Wow. Excellent. I'm curious, you know, when you mentioned some of your work prior to coming to Yale and also that you still go out into communities, right, to talk to students, to let them know, like, these are actual opportunities that you could take advantage of, that maybe they either wouldn't have thought of before or thought that maybe it just wasn't an opportunity that was open to them. So I'm curious, you know, what kind of advice do you give these students in terms of, you know, if those who are aspiring to become future leaders, or, you know, they want to explore international opportunities? Like, what are some examples, or maybe if you could think of the top two pieces of, you know, advice that you give students who are looking to get into this, these programs?
I think so. Whenever I talk to, it's funny because I talk to like Japanese high school groups, and then I talk to like American high school students as well, because I'm always thinking about entry points, right? So I came to study Japanese in high school because my high school had an absurd number of foreign languages offered, and Japanese just seemed interesting. And when I went to visit the different classes, the Japanese teacher seemed really nice, and she had food. So, like, again, you just never know what the hook is going to be. Right. And that sort of has been my sort of, you know, it's been in my life now since the age of 14.
Absolutely. And they always say food, it really does. It brings people together, right?
It does. And if it's good, and Japanese food is really good.
Yeah, so, food and music, right?
Yes, food and music. Exactly.
It's kind of like a common language, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's okay. So, you know, I always think about, you know, and so for me, it was my teacher and just an interest in the material. And I love to learn. So that is what sort of kept me going. That is what, you know, kept me going despite, you know, not always great grades in grammar for Japanese or the tough times. So the one thing is I ask students to think about, what is your entry point? Sort of where, you know, what makes you interested in this? And you don't have to think about it necessarily in the long term, but keep that in the center of what interests you. You can stay true to it. So if your interest to Japanese culture, as it was for many who came behind me, was like popular culture, anime, or manga, the comic books, that can be the sort of core that brought you in. It can even be the thing that makes you stay.
Right.
But the thing is you also want it to be the thing that helps you grow, right? So you can stay, you can come, you can stay, but, you know, expand beyond that to learn sort of, you know, okay, if you're interested in the stories, who are some of the writers? What are the places that are referred to in these comic books? You know, what are some of the phrases? Is that who says those things? You know, what types of relationships are the people who say those things? So find ways to expand your knowledge you can still keep that thing at the core, but, you eventually want to grow beyond that because that's the stuff. And eventually those things will get you to people because people are what keep you connected. When I go back to Japan, I make time to visit former colleagues, teachers that I used to teach with back when I was teaching in schools, my host family. I met up with my host sister a few years ago before the pandemic for the first time. We hadn't seen each other since we were 15 years old. It was kind of weird, but it was fun. But again, it's the people that keep you connected to these places and cultures. And so, think about your entry point. It can be the thing that brought you, it can be the thing that stays, but also have it be the thing that helps you grow. So that's the first piece of information or first piece of advice. The second piece is, I think, don't let anybody make you feel bad for your passion. So when I told my parents I wanted to study Japanese, they were like, what? You will never use it. Why do you need to study Japanese? You should take Spanish. And as I said, my parents were teachers. So they were like, you have to give us a good reason why you want to study Japanese. So I had to give my parents a presentation to why they would approve, because at that time they need to sign off on my schedule. So they were like, so I had to give a presentation. My mother says she has it still somewhere.
That's awesome.
It wasn't a PowerPoint because PowerPoint wasn't a thing back in that day. Right? No, we had word processors.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yes, I remember. Remember the slide things. Oh gosh, those were painful. But go ahead.
Computers. Who knew? And so, and then when I went to Japan for the first time, I had family members who were like, "You're gonna go over there, and you're gonna find, you're gonna come back with some Japanese person in a suitcase." So there's just this unknowingness, and also like you're strange, or even to this day, people are always like, how did you get interested in Japan? Where did that come from? And, there's always this sort of question of why. And if I had been a different person, it might have stopped me or made me think twice and change course. But I think because I am who I am, I was just like, I'm not paying attention to y'all. I really enjoy this. I don't know where this is going to all end up in the end, but it's something that I really enjoy and I'm passionate about. And, I'm sure it'll make sense in some way in the future. And it has.
Right. And here we are.
Exactly. This is, now I'm here and doing this thing. And, so, don't let anybody discourage you or make you feel bad for the things that you love or are passionate about.
That's awesome. Very true. Wow. So Mya, I wish it's almost like, gosh, we need another hour, but we're wrapping up our hour. And, it was awesome chatting with you today. And I honestly, I think we need a part 2. So to wrap things up, I would love to hear, you've shared actually lots of personal stories and moments from your career, but I'm wondering if there's one moment or story that you'd like to share that left, a lasting impact on you, and then continues to inspire you. I feel like our entire conversation really revolves around that, but I'm curious if there's just one more that you haven't shared with me today. Not a story, but a relationship. Okay. If that will help. That sounds even better.
So when I went to Japan during college or after college and was teaching there, it was in the early 2000s. And I worked for a city government, and in Japan, it was before the days of things like direct deposits for your paychecks. So every month, we teachers would have to go to the city center, education center, and pick up our wads of money in our paychecks. And then we would go there around lunchtime. And then the lunchtime, we'd all bike across the river and deposit our cash into our bank accounts, which was an
experience.
It's definitely a cultural experience.
Yeah.
And the person who used to pay us was he was just a central office employee. His name was Mr. Abe, and he is one of those people that I used to describe as a not typical Japanese person because he used to he had an earring, he had like a gold chain, and he like a thick gold chain, and he spoke no English.
Oh wow!
But he loved the English teachers.
Oh wow!
And one like. In the first 6 months or so, he invited me and one of the other English teachers. He had a weekend house in Nagano Prefecture, which was a prefecture that was about 2 hours away by car. And we were like, I knew Japanese or some Japanese, but she didn't know a lot of Japanese. And we were like, how are we going to spend a weekend with this dude who speaks no English?
Right.
What are we going to do for a weekend?
How are we going to communicate?
How are we going to do this? But the other teachers who had been there longer were like, he's really, really cool. It's a beautiful house. It's in the countryside. He also does pottery.
Oh, wow.
And so, you should just really, really go. And his wife is a really, really good cook. You should go. They're really cool people. So we're like, okay. So we go, our first foray, it's like in February. And lo and behold, we go, and that weekend there is a storm with 6 feet of snow.
Oh my gosh.
And we get snowed in. So we couldn't even go anywhere. We couldn't leave the house. And, the plows and stuff were coming through it. It was this little tiny town. And we spend the weekend doing pottery. So he's a pottery teacher on the side. So he was teaching us how to do pottery. And then he decided that, okay, we're going to do this other project. So he pulls out these big sheets of paper and he starts helping. He's like, just write words. So he pulls out this dictionary. And so he starts writing words in English. And then we start writing simplified words in Japanese. And we're like, what is he doing? Like, what are we doing? This is just like an exercise in like handwriting. Like, what's happening? And at the end of that, he let it dry overnight. And then the next day, the papers have disappeared. And we're like, where did they go? And his wife was making breakfast and whatever. So we sit down to breakfast. And lo and behold, he had taken the papers, cut them down to size, and used them to wallpaper the bathroom.
Oh, wow.
On the first floor.
Oh my goodness.
Of the house. And we were like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And he was like, he's like, this is your contribution to our house. Aww. And it's one of those things where I was just like, you never know where a risk, a choice, or doing something that you never thought you would do could lead you.
Wow.
And this person became probably the most important person to me in Japan during those years. He embraced me after that. When my family came to visit, he invited my parents to the house. We spent a few days there when my parents were visiting Japan. He and my dad bonded. My dad doesn't speak any Japanese. Abe didn't speak any English, but somehow they went on a walk in town and he introduced him to it was just, they had this whole bonding thing.
Yeah.
And, when I came back, it turns out he got sick. And people from Japan were calling me and they were like, Mya, you have to come. He's dying. And I was able to go. That's why I needed to take knitting needles on the airplane. I was able to see him before he died. And during that time, his wife, who I didn't have a relationship with as much, she and I spent a lot of time talking in the day room outside, and we began a relationship. And to this day, she and I are still in communication. And so it's one of those things where, as I said, the people are what keep me connected to Japan. And had I not said, yeah, I don't know how this is going to work, but let's do it, I would have never had the joy of that relationship, that friendship, with me for the length of time that I did.
Right.
And so that is, I think, the risk, the joy, and the reward of, doing things across cultures and just with people in general.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, that relationship, the origin, the existence, and even the ending to some respect, I think are the things that stay with me.
Oh, that's a beautiful story. I love that. And it kind of brings me to my final question. I do have one more question for you related to that, because I'm glad that really was a beautiful story. How does that experience affect what you foresee or what you would like to happen with our DEIB committee here at Yale College? And if you could, in 1 year, tell me one thing you'd like us to accomplish together on the committee, what would that be?
Well, I think we've already accomplished one of the things that we've talked about, which is more people wanting to engage. We've seen a number of people who've showed interest in joining the committee, which we're like, yay!
I know, it's awesome.
Keep them coming.
5 people, by the way, right?
Yeah, new
5
people
so far. Yeah.
So, that interest, I think, speaks to people's interest, but also to your earlier point of people's feelings of safety to being able to do that, right?
Yes.
So I think that was one of the things that was one of our goals. And so I think that's an ongoing thing. In a year, I think what I would like to see is, I would like to see the conversations, the interactions, and just the feeling of belonging, people feeling like they belong, and the actions of including people so that they feel to include belonging. I would like to see that more embedded in the day-to-day, not just our interactions as colleagues, but between the institution and the people.
Yes.
And so we can start small, whether that is, some of the things that we saw in the survey, whether that's transparency, whether that's just understanding what people do here, communication, like whatever it is. If there are 3 demonstrated areas where inclusion and belonging, the sentiment is embedded visibly in between the institution and the people, that would be success. That would be a good start.
That's awesome. And we have our work cut out for us, right?
Oh, yes. The work is never done. It took us how many years to get here?
Yes.
Hundreds of years to get here.
Right.
It'll be a long time to get out of this.
Right.
But I don't know about you, but I do not tire. I am energized by the work ahead.
Yes.
And I always say that I don't think Yale knew what they were getting into when they said yes to hiring me. So I am here as long as they will let me stay.
Yes, that's awesome. That is awesome. And yes, absolutely. I am excited about where things can go from here. This past summer was my 16th year here at Yale. And yeah, I'm excited. Like even just doing this podcast has been a great experience. It's been amazing actually, just to talk to different people and then the feedback that we've been getting on the episodes it's been awesome and amazing. It's even, it's been rewarding for me because it's like, people who give me compliments and to be honest, this was outside of my comfort zone. This wasn't something that I really just wanted to be behind the scenes and can I just buy some cameras and I'll set you up, but I'll sit behind the scenes, I'll post this stuff on the site and, and somehow it became this but it's been wonderful because I've had a chance to get to know lots of folks, including you, and made some new friends.
And you're our superstar now. You're the voice of the Yale College Voices, and I love I have it on Spotify, and I get the updates when a new episode drops, and I'm like, ooh,
perfect.
And it's cool now, also because being a member of the Yale community, these are people who are here, right? Yes. And so, like, so often for podcasts, it's like people who are, 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from you, right?
Exactly.
But here it's like, wow, these are actually people that if I wanted to follow up, I could invite for coffee because I'm like, I heard you on your podcast and you said this really interesting thing.
It's a conversation starter.
Exactly.
Which I love that. And I love, I love that we've gotten to know beyond, okay, here's what you do for Yale or here's your job. Yep. But I love that I've learned so much about people, what you do outside of Yale with your time and some, truly amazing folks and yourself included. I mean, it's the amount of experience and knowledge that we have, all jam-packed in our Yale College staff. I mean, it's pretty cool to think we have so many different backgrounds and things that people do for the community here in New Haven and internationally. And this has been an awesome experience. So,
and I hope one of the things that I hope is that it helps people to have a sense of, people's dimensions, like the wholeness. So when you ask people of their time, when you ask people to do, like you have a sense that, or it just gets you to think that, oh, maybe this person has more than just extra time outside of work because everybody is doing all of these things, because then it actually also changes how you interact, respect people's time, ask people for help, call on people for advice or whatever. And I think that, again, adds to people feeling seen, heard, and felt like people respect them and their fullness, not just this one dimension of work.
So that's been my goal, is just, getting to know people here at Yale College. And who knows? I'm like, who knows? Maybe this will expand, beyond Yale College. I don't know. But yeah, getting to know folks so that attaching faces and actual, we are human beings that contribute to this wonderful place. And hopefully, whether it's students or other staff or whomever, and they cross paths with the folks I've interviewed so far, that it is a conversation starter, and it's a way to connect and make you feel more comfortable to have a conversation, no matter what that conversation may be. So yeah, if I affect one person, then I've been successful in doing this. So
now we just have to figure out who's going to interview you at some point.
I do. So I did get one volunteer, actually, believe it or not.
Okay.
So I don't know. I have to schedule that. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet.
Well, you have to put that like as, that's like the New Year's or a birthday edition or something.
The New Year's edition.
Like a special edition of the podcast.
I know. And that's the other thing, too, because the folks I've reached out to schedule podcasts, interviews, they're like, I'm not that interesting. And I'm like, yes, you are. And I think some people felt initially like, I don't know. I mean, what would I talk about? And in some ways I kind of feel that way. But I think what has been awesome about doing this, again, is just attaching the human side of, we're all people. We all do different things.
And we all have a story to tell.
We all have a story to tell, and they're all amazing stories. I mean, honestly, like all of the episodes I've recorded so far and upcoming episodes, I'm just, I'm actually really proud that I am. That, to have this kaleidoscope of stories from our staff. So, but anyway, I can go on and on. We're going to run out of time. So
yes, we just carry this on into a lunch conversation.
I know, right? We need to go to lunch now. Perfect timing.
Yes.
So Mya, thank you so much again. I number one, appreciate your, your friendship, being able to work with you on the advisory committee, and just being able to interact with you and have you on the podcast. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your support. You're wonderful. You're wonderful. It's a great marriage.
Always here. Yes.
So thank you very much for today. So of course I have to plug you mentioned Spotify. So we are on Spotify. We're on SoundCloud and also Apple Podcasts. So please check us out. And the episode will be posted soon. I'm hoping to post at least a few more before the holiday break, before the winter break. So check us out. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram. I hope you're following me.
I don't have an Instagram.
Oh, you have to create one now. See, now I'm going to help you create one.
Okay, that's my homework. That's
your homework. We need one more follower.
There you go.
Yale College Voices. That's the account on Instagram. So again, thank you so much for today.
Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
My pleasure. It was fun. We need another hour.
It's a great way to end the week.
It is. So I appreciate that. And now we're going to end that here. So thank you, Mya.
Thanks.
All right.